All right, everyone, welcome back to the 2020 Bible Bracket. It's been madness around here, and again, this is your challenge to become a Bible boss. And we're joined here again with Braylon Tempe, our intern, seminarian at the Masters Institute. Welcome, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Very good. Well, we had the first round footage a few days ago, and Abraham came through huge. He wasn't on either one of our brackets, but he ended up taking it. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, somehow he just worked his way through. Neither of us were planning on that, but it's just the way the cookie crumbles.
And some of our viewers weren't very happy about the way things went down, and we're sorry. Again, this is just for fun, so don't take it too seriously. Also, you'll notice that Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and God the Father are not on the bracket because they would win this very easily. You wouldn't even need to do a tournament. But today we're going to be going through the writings and the historical books and the prophets. This is really the largest section of Scripture we're going to be covering, and there are a lot of contenders in this lineup here. How do you feel about today's lineup? Who do you feel is strong? Who do you feel could be a dark horse?
I've got to say this to me is definitely the hardest region, because the Gospels and letters get a little easier, and the last round, all the Genesis people, are a little easier, but this one, so many important people doing so many important things, all the span of Israel, the nation. There's a lot going on. I think obviously the first 1, 2, 3 seeded people are looking pretty good, but I think any one of these could be a dark horse candidate.
I think so too. Well, let's get to it. Our first matchup is a 1 seed, King David. Not only the King David, but the guy who wrote most of the Psalms, guitar player, a really cool guy, going up against Job, a man known for suffering. And what are some of your initial thoughts on these guys and this matchup today?
My initial thought is I wish Job was going up against someone else in the first round. I think his story is so important in knowing the character of God, because you do have the historical narrative, but at the same time you also have how God interacts with people. So we have how people interact with God, but how God interacts with people, and Job just sheds so much light on that. But I think David is looking pretty good.
Yeah, I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. That I feel like locking David in right away here. I think it's an easy call. I don't think Job can stand up to this. I like the book of Job, don't get me wrong, but David has to take it here. We'll hear more about David in the following rounds. So let's go to our board. You guys know this is the most exciting part of our day when we go to the board, and we're going to lock David in here, first round winner. Moving on to the round of 32. All right, let's move into the next challenge, the next one, because I think this is our early pick'em. Really, we got Daniel the prophet going up against Ruth. For our viewers at home who may not be so up to date on who these characters are, give us a word or two about Daniel and about Ruth.
Yeah, Daniel was a great prophet. He was taken into exile, so he started in Israel, but then he was quickly removed, and that adds a whole element to his character. He was a great prayer. We see that he had powerful prayers and things to say to the people, and he really stood up for his people and for God, and he played a big role. But we also have Ruth, and she's one of the 5 women included in Jesus' genealogy, so clearly a very important person. She was actually a Moabite, so she wasn't an Israelite as a part of that genealogy, which is distinct. She is the great-grandmother of David, so we see that her family has a lot of big ties, and she's really seen as the symbol of kindness and virtue and loyalty and all those great qualities. She's really held up as a saint of the faith.
Yeah, no, for real, she is a huge asset to this bracket. She's also a huge asset to the redemptive story of the Bible. One of the things that I appreciate about Ruth is just how she was so captivated by the Israelites and wanted to go with Naomi where she went. And as I start this bracket, I really thought I was going to give this to Daniel right away, just thinking about him and what he plays as far as prophecy and things like that. But I went back and forth on this, and I feel like I'm leaning more towards Team Ruth. What are some of your thoughts?
I think for this one, after doing more research on her, I try to find the good and the bad of both people, and it's hard to find any bad for her. She's just virtuous, and she's really a Gentile brought into the Israelite faith, so we're already seeing God work in other people. So I think it's an important part of the story that the Gentile nations are brought in, and when she told Naomi, like, your people are my people, your God is my God, I'm going to follow him, I think that was a major breakthrough.
You know, and Daniel, you know, don't get me wrong, Daniel plays a significant role. I just don't know if he plays a big enough role in the overall story. There's some powerful passages that Daniel has, but I just feel like I need to give this to Ruth. Kind of an early upset. What are you thinking?
I was actually leaning that way as well. I think Daniel said a lot of great things, but at the same time, he didn't, in the story of the Bible, he didn't really move things along that well, whereas Ruth rejoined the Israelite nation, and David came from her, and all these great connections, and I think there's a lot to be said about Ruth.
All right, we do have one audience member shaking his head, and he is not happy about this pick one bit. Mr. Jim Engstrom, what would you contribute to this discussion about Daniel and Ruth?
I can't even, words can't even.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking, but yeah, we're going to move Ruth on.
We get pretty controversial here.
Yeah, we do, and feel free to put a comment below if you think this is way off, but we do feel like Team Ruth is going forward here.
Also, when she was a child, the candy bar named after her.
That's right, Baby Ruth. Yeah, you have Baby Ruth. You don't have Baby Ruth without Ruth.
Yeah.
From the Bible. Let's move to the next matchup. This is a 5-12 matchup, and these are always good matchups if you follow your brackets closely. Here we have Solomon, son of David, going up against Boaz, the husband of Ruth. So we got Boaz and we have Solomon. Who are we thinking here?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one because we have Solomon, the wise ruler, but his character, especially as the story goes on, is just falls apart. And I think Boaz is just the epitome of good character. And when you look at these two men, Boaz is the man that Solomon should have been, with all his wisdom.
Yeah, you know, Boaz is the one who redeems Ruth and brings her into the nation. Solomon, on the other hand, would eventually split the nation. Under his children, the nation of Israel would split. And as far as the biblical story goes, that's super important to what happened, whether it's negative or positive. I think without that, you don't have much of what we read about in the writings of the prophets.
Yeah, I'd also say, though, that with Solomon, it seems like if you look at the story of the Bible and what it's all about, the redemption of man and the relationship with God, Solomon is really not a great figure. We think of his wisdom and all of that, but he really helped deteriorate the nation and what they stood for, and he brought in all these other gods, and as an Israelite who's doing all of this, he's really a destructive force when you look at the span of his career.
Yeah, it's hard to put through someone like this. I think I'm leaning Team Solomon. I really feel like he's an important part of this story, and I'm just laughing. We're getting more reaction from the crowd here. But I think by putting Solomon through, I do want to give one maybe redemptive side to Solomon's life. There are many who say the book of Ecclesiastes is written by Solomon. And if you get to the end of the book of Solomon, some say it's a reflection on his life. And at the very end, he says the chief aim of man is to fear God and obey his commands. Almost as if he's come back to that. I'd like to think so. But yeah, I think we both feel pretty good about this, moving them through.
Yeah, I think just the weight of what Solomon did, and although a lot of it was very negative, and one interesting point I found was that God attributes the split of Israel directly to Solomon. He said, your children are going to break apart this nation because of you. And as negative as that is, it is pretty important for
It's important, but I want to come back to Boaz. I see you do have Boaz.
Yeah, I did.
On your sheet.
He is an initial pick of mine.
And why would you put him over him? How would you see him being more important?
I think that when you look at the Bible and just the connectedness and the stories, Boaz is likely the son of Rahab, who helped the people break into Jericho, and he's just this kind and protective and loving guy, and he doesn't take what he wants. He follows the law, and he's just the epitome of what Israel is supposed to be. And I think if he were to overcome Solomon, you really have the two opposites. You have the one who broke everything and hit the reason for the need of redemption, and then Boaz, who is kind of following exactly how he's supposed to.
Yeah. I think, actually, I do think I'm moving back the other way. I think I do like Boaz better in this spot. I think he's more essential to the story. Again, this is a hard one, but just for the sake of fun, let's throw Boaz in there. Why don't we go to the board?
Yeah, this is a big upset, but I think when you just look at his character, and he stands for what Israel should have.
Yeah, for sure. Let's put him on the board. All right, that's going to set up a really interesting showdown later on. But let's move to this next matchup. We got Elijah the prophet versus Ezra, and Elijah is known as the prophet from the Old Testament, and Ezra really, as the priest, as the people come back from exile, he really serves as that new voice. What are you thinking here? Is there any? And, I don't think this is too close, but what are some of the things you're seeing?
Yeah, I think. When you look at Ezra, he did a lot of good. He brought the law back when people came back from Persia, and he did quite a bit of good with that. But on the other hand, a lot of rabbinic scholars actually say he basically founded the Sanhedrin, or he founded the group that became the Sanhedrin, and you see the damage they did with their utter devotion to the law and nothing else, and eventually it is the Sanhedrin that says Jesus' teaching of mercy and grace, that's no good.
Yeah, Jesus always has to remind them, have you not read? And he's always reminding them about the prophets. He's like, have you not read the prophets? And that's a huge part of the story. And so, I like Ezra, and I love the episode where everyone repents and everything like that. But I think as far as the story of the Bible goes, you have Elijah showing up on the Mount of Transfiguration. You have Elijah being the one who needs to come before the Messiah, who is John the Baptist in a lot of ways. So I'm not sure, do we feel pretty good about just moving Elijah through? We can talk more about
I feel pretty comfortable about that.
Okay, sweet, let's put him on the board. Elijah, 4 seed, moving through to the round of 32. All right. This next showdown, I know for sure, and it's a fact, that me and Braylon have different people picked on this one. We have Rahab going up against the prophet Isaiah, and I'll show my cards. I'm Team Isaiah.
Yeah, I'm Team Rahab with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So interesting to see. Isaiah is a 6 seed. Rahab is an 11. This would be a huge upset if Rahab were to move through here. Talk to me about Rahab. Why is she so important here?
I think when I broke this one down, I was really looking at how they contributed to the story of the Bible. And Isaiah gives so many insights on God and who he is, and on what it means to be part of his people. But when you look at the story of Rahab, she is this woman with possibly sketchy background. We're not positive if she was just an innkeeper or something else along with that. But she's another one of these 5 women that are listed in the genealogy of Jesus. She's that important, and she assisted in the takeover of Jericho, and she became an Israelite because of that. And kind of the story of Ruth, where she said, "Your God is my God." Like, this is part of what she grew up into, or decided to live into. And she also is one of the ancestors of Boaz, David, Solomon. She really, by joining the Israelite people, put a lot of things into motion.
Yeah, I get that. One of the things interesting about Rahab as well is she's going to show up in the New Testament in Hebrews 11 when the writer of Hebrews, we don't know who it is, if it's Paul or someone else. All we know is she's probably pretty smart, the author of Hebrews. But Hebrews 11, we know that, I love that joke. Hebrews 11, she shows up in the Hall of Fame of Faith. And what deed is she known for? For being deceptive, lying. There's an ethical question right there of, is it ever okay to lie? And she gets put in the Hall of Fame of Faith, and you guys can talk about that at home if it's ever okay to lie, even though God says not to. But looking at Isaiah, many people say the book of Isaiah is a condensed version of the entire Bible. 66 chapters. How many books in the Bible? 66, yeah. And you also have, from the first part of Isaiah, you have a lot more words on judgment. The second part, you have God coming to save his people. We have Isaiah 53. Some people call this the fifth gospel. It's where we hear about the entire life of the Messiah. And it's an essential part of our preaching. Our Advent texts really surround the story of Isaiah prophesying about a virgin having a child. And I just feel like without Isaiah, I'm feeling like, could God find someone else to do that prophetic work? I think so. But I think there could have been another innkeeper easily. So I don't know. I'm still feeling pretty strong about Isaiah. Am I moving you one way or the other?
Yeah, I do have a couple good things for Isaiah as well. I think the episode of him being there when the angels came in and took out the 185,000 soldiers attacking Israel, that was a huge moment, and the historical evidence for that is also interesting, but that's a side thing. And I found this quote from Jerome, who was a church father. He said, Isaiah was more of an evangelist than a prophet because he described all of the mysteries of the Church of Christ so vividly that you would assume he was not prophesying about the future, but rather composing a history of past events.
Wow.
So he's saying that Isaiah's testimony was so compelling, it was as if he was one of the gospel writers.
No, I think for that's why I would really feel sad to not move Isaiah into the next round. Where are you landing here? Rahab, the liar, versus the prophet who prophesied the Messiah and saw his coming. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one when it's someone who did a lot versus someone who their ideas and what they wrote and experienced moved things along. But I can see with the argument of being almost a fifth gospel, I can see Isaiah being an important figure.
We're getting negative reactions from our crowd. That might be a good thing. So,
yeah, maybe.
Do you mind if I put him on the board here?
Yeah.
Is that cool with you? This is my first time. You guys can experience handwriting of Matt. I-S-A-I-A-H. And make sure to check out the warm front coming through. Did you already zoom away? All right, what's our next matchup here?
Next we have Samuel and Nehemiah.
All right,
Third
Samuel
seed and 14th seed.
and Samuel is a 3, Nehemiah is a 14. So Samuel's kind of a behind the scenes kind of character. He really gets the I would say it's the second movement of the conquest going, where Samuel is a prophet who is telling the people the truth, and he's really leading Israel in the absence of a king, which was God's intention, is that they wouldn't have a king, they wouldn't need a king. It's under Samuel that they eventually demand a king, and they eventually bring in Saul, King David, these guys, so he's really the one, writing or leading Israel in the time when they don't have a king and trying to advise their kings in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean, he is a kingmaker in a sense, or a king anointer. I think Nehemiah has a lot of good for him. He returns with Ezra from the Persian Empire, and he goes ahead and he's building walls and protecting the people and rediscovering the law and all of these great things. It is interesting to note that looking at the rabbinic tradition for him, they're not too kind to him. They see him as a boastful person who said, God bless our people by my goodness, and other ideas like that he was speaking poorly about all who came before him, like Daniel and the other prophets. And I think that is an interesting aspect of a person when you see them being prideful and boasting, even though they are doing a lot of good.
Yeah, for Samuel, back to Samuel again, he will be the one who anoints the king with oil. From that word anointing, we get the word Messiah or Savior. And so, already through Samuel, looking forward to a Messiah, I think it all starts with Samuel. I really don't think this one's close at all, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a slam dunk win, and I think we're going to give this one to Mr. Samuel. You feel good about that?
Yep, I do.
Let's put it on the board. It's possible there has been some tampering with our board as this section has been going on.
Technical.
And Nehemiah has been written in, but that is a miswrite.
He is gone.
He's gone. We're going to be writing Mr. Samuel. There it is. There it is. And let's see, we have a few more matchups here in the round of 64, and we have Saul versus Esther. Saul the king, Esther the queen. King and queen showdown. We have a 7 and a 10 going at it here. Saul is the handsome, tall, charismatic first king of Israel. Eventually would go insane, and actually God's spirit would be taken from him. Pretty crazy stuff. Esther, what's important about her?
So this is interesting. She became the queen to a Persian king, and there was this plot from some of the king's advisors to try to take out the Jewish people, and he didn't like the competition, and Esther found out about this, and she really put a stop to that. So really, she saved her people. Without her, the Jews could have very easily been wiped out in a nation as strong as Persia. That would have been no problem for them, and she really stood up to this king, and she broke all of these traditions and rules that they had about approaching the king and said, no, this isn't going to happen. And as we do see, there is a downside that her reaction to those conspirators was very violent and just wiped them out. But on the other hand, she did save her people.
Yeah, I think Esther's a strong one here. I think she, also interesting, the word God doesn't show up in the book of Esther. Did you know that? Not one time. And it's an interesting story about how God is like all over the story and doesn't even need to be mentioned. And that's a pretty cool thing. Also in the VeggieTales version, what is the name of the evil king? Is it not Mordecai is the uncle, and if maybe someone
Is it Artaxerxes?
I'm trying to think of the king in the story.
Xerxes?
Nope. I'm gonna do a quick Google here. King during Esther. You were right about that one, but I'm trying to think of in the story. Haman. Is there a Haman?
Oh, he was that.
He's a bad guy.
He was the advisor who wanted to.
He's the advisor, and so Haman eventually will get hung. He will be hanged. That's the way you say it, I think. And in the VeggieTale version, he goes to the tickling gallows, and so they do a cute thing there. But yeah, I think as far as saving her people, Esther's huge. Saul doesn't necessarily save his people. He shows us what a bad king can do. So I think Esther is another strong one coming through. We have another lady coming through.
Yeah, Saul was everything that Israel wasn't supposed to have.
Right.
Weren't supposed to have a king. He did exactly what God said would happen if they had a king. And Esther, she is very overlooked, but incredible story of saving her people single-handedly.
Yep. And instituting the festival of.
I have it written down. Where is it?
it's the only festival instituted in the Bible that's outside of.
I think it's Purim.
Purim, the festival of Purim. That's the only festival instituted outside of the first 5 books of the law. And so, yeah, for her to have that is pretty big. So
yeah, a holiday for giving to the poor and
Yep.
being with family. It's an important one.
cool. Well, let's move Esther through. I'll throw her up on the board here, and then we'll have one more round here to get through. Oh, that's an S. Here we go. Esther, there we go. We're gonna have Braylon keep writing from now on. That wasn't too good. All right, last matchup of this round, we have Joshua, the general, and going up against Elisha, the prophet. And I'm surprised, again, this happened last time, I'm surprised how high Joshua is. I'm surprised how low Elisha is. What are some of your first takes on this?
Yeah, I was looking at that again, and I mean, Elisha is kind of a second Elijah. So seeing them so far apart is very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, Elisha plays a big role in the prophetic ministry of Israel. Joshua, though, really becomes that main leader of Israel in their time of conquest. Just like we sent Samuel through in that time as their leader, and you know, same with Moses in the last round. I think the same can be said for Joshua, as you know, and his name means the Lord is salvation. You may know someone else who has the same name. His name is Jesus, or Yeshua, which is the same name. So, pretty good. Elisha, good guy. Pat on the back. I just don't see him making anything happen further on in this.
Yeah, I think Joshua he was the person that God kind of envisioned leading Israel. Not a king, but someone completely following God. And yeah, I think it's important for the story.
Yep. Also, fun fact, any kind of Hebrew name that ends in Yah, like Joshua or Elisha, that Joshua, Elisha, that's referring to Yahweh. And so that's putting Yahweh's name in those names. I think Joshua gets it here. And I also, Elisha. Why are you called Elisha and there's already an Elijah? They're too similar. It's confusing, and I know some people who you're like Elisha, they're like yeah, and they think Elijah and Elisha are the same person. So I wish he was like Frank, like it was Elijah and Frank, and you know, Elijah gives his tunic to Frank. So anyways, that's why
I've ranked a little higher.
I think if he was the prophet Frank, he would have gone much deeper because it is just flat out confusing. So let's put Joshua on the board here. Joshua, nice. Now we move into the round of 32, and by the end of this, we'll have one person moving on to the final 4. And this matchup is King David versus Great Grandma Ruth. We have King David, a huge figure of Israel, going up against his grandma. Without her, we don't have David.
Yeah, it's one of those tough ones when you're looking at the importance of a character. Is like, well, without Ruth, you wouldn't have David. Without, a lot of people are so connected in the story.
And you guys gotta know, we love Ruth. We love Ruth like crazy. We're Team Ruth all the way. You know, I don't think this is that close though. I just feel like David, you know, he has so much of an impact on the biblical story as being a king after God's own heart. You know, the Goliath story. You have, you know, him being picked as king. Even as a kid, we have him really just showing what a king can be like. Also, we see his flaws. We see his flaws all the way through, but we also see his repentant heart. And so I think, in this sense, David really sets the tone again. In the previous one, we set Abraham through because in the Gospel of Matthew, the genealogy goes back to the Messiah, the son of Abraham, the son of David. Both those heavy hitters, and I just feel like when you're the Messiah in those lines, those are 2 heavy hitter names. I don't know if you want to even touch those.
Yeah, and I mean, even with just the Psalms showing the heart, or what it looks like to have a heart for God, and in the laments and the joys, and just it's such a blessing to have that book alone.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we're thinking King David. We've loved having Ruth. We hope she sticks around to cheer us on through this.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of weird, isn't it?
Maybe next year. I don't know.
Maybe next year she'll take a step in. So, all right, we're gonna put David through. He's moving on to the Sweet 16. We hope you're following along at home. Remember, you got 1 point for each first round win, 2 points for this round, 3 for the next, and 4 for the one after that. So let's keep moving on here. We got Solomon versus Elijah.
We've got Boaz versus Elijah.
Boaz, that's right. We switched it. I need to switch it on my bracket here. Boaz versus Elijah. Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, Boaz. Is that right? Yeah, Boaz versus Elijah. What are you seeing here for this matchup?
Yeah, I think this one gets a lot more difficult for Boaz because Elijah was the man who he needed to be. We see him really taking a lot of hits from the nation and really almost alone standing up against the just wickedness and evilness and even at a point where he said, God, it'd just be better if I die. They're not getting it. Yeah. He says, no, you're the one for the job, and he keeps going.
Yeah, again, we love Boaz too. We're Team Boaz, but I think as far as the overall story of the Bible, Elijah is definitely a bigger player. I think the whole showdown with the prophets at Baal, on Mount Carmel, and I think that it's just really Elijah seems to be able to take this. Any thoughts on Boaz? We moved him through over Solomon in the last round.
Yeah.
Any way we could see Boaz make its way through here?
I think this is tough. I think his character and living as the ideal follower of God, I think that is very important. But then we see Elijah just cleaning up all the messes from that whole family tree.
Yeah. No, I like Elijah here. I think, and I also, he's Elijah, not Elisha, so I like that better. So let's move Elijah into the next round, and we'll get ready for the next battle here in a minute. So we have Elijah moving on to the Sweet 16. I think this next one's pretty close. We have Isaiah versus Samuel, and both really critical to the story of Israel, critical to this bracket. We have both are prophets, so they're both really in tune with what God was saying at their time to tell their people the truth. What are you seeing here?
I think the one area where Samuel might have trouble is when he was God's prophet to the people. He kind of caved in almost a little bit when he said, yeah, they're not having this. They really want a king. Should we just give them a king? And we see what a problem that was for Israel. They only lasted 3 real kings and then just fell apart.
Yeah, I think so. And with Isaiah, you have, as far as the biblical story, again, you have the whole scriptures really kind of being prophesied there and talked about. Also you have in Isaiah the just a powerful, we have so much writing of his, and with Samuel we have less of that. We have more of him in narrative versus what he actually put down. Anyway, you see Samuel making it past Isaiah here.
I think it's tough. I think credit for him, he really kept the religious identity alive because they were conquered by the Philistines at one point, and he was a part of that, but we see Isaiah, he kept doing that over and over again, and the people really went through a lot during his period, and he said, nope, we're still sticking it out. So
I think so. I think Isaiah is a stronger candidate. I feel better. I'm guessing more people at home have Isaiah going through on their bracket, so hopefully we make the fans at home happy here, but also we think it's true. So let's move Isaiah into the next round, the Sweet 16. And with Isaiah, you have another one of those Yahs, that referring to Yahweh. And next we have, in the final round here, Esther versus Joshua. Esther versus Joshua. Maybe I'll hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, this is, for how they're seeded, this is a very interesting one. I think it's a second seed versus 10th seed, but when you look at Esther and what she did, and I mean, there's a lot to be said about, like, could the story have really happened if she hadn't stepped in? And I mean, God probably could have raised anyone up, but she was the one who did it and stood up for it. And on the other hand, you have Joshua, who led the people into conquest, and he had some episodes where he wasn't quite sure of himself, but as we have seen with the story of Israel, that's pretty common. You have Moses stumbling and all kinds of people messing up, but he's the one that said, I'm going to do this, and it was a tough job.
Yeah, this is a tough battle, because we like Esther a lot. We like Joshua. Actually, I think I personally like Esther more than I like Joshua. I do think as far as her really saving the people, I think that just goes so far into the story of the Bible. So how do you feel about her going through, or do you have another argument for Joshua?
Yeah, I think I mean, Joshua, again with his name, he is kind of a proto-Jesus. So we have their names being so similar, and he really listened to God and tried to bring the people to the promised land where they would experience Sabbath and rest. And we see that ultimately in Jesus providing us rest and peace. And I think that's a big part of what he did. On the other hand, he was a little overzealous. He would sometimes just go ahead and charge, and there were a couple of times when God said, that's not what we wanted. So there is some question to, was he just a great general, or was he really the true leader they needed?
Yeah, I could see it either way here. I do like that Esther has a VeggieTales episode that she features in, and it's a really good one if you haven't seen it. I know that you probably have plenty of time to watch videos now, but the Esther VeggieTales is phenomenal. I don't know if Joshua got a VeggieTales video out there. Are you aware of anything? So I think Esther moves through. I think it's the right thing to do. I think she's well fit for the task. Definitely a Cinderella story, really. I mean, I think she does have her work cut out for her in the next round, as she'll be going up against Isaiah, I believe. But should we put Esther through on the board?
Yeah, and as we said at the beginning, this is the round or the region where there's going to be a lot of important people, and
there's
just looking at her story closer, and
all of these people would be fun to see go up against other people from other parts of the Bible. Sweet, and as you think about it, the first round we were dealing with 5 books of the Bible. Here we're dealing with 34 books of the Bible. So that's a ton of time we're covering. And so, if your heart's broken at home, we apologize, but we must move on. The next round, the Sweet 16, we got a really, really big one in the very beginning. David v. Elijah. And so we have David, the king, going against the prophet Elijah. This is going to be a drag down battle. I think if the two were just fighting in real life, I think I'm going to take Elijah for sure. He seems more gritty. I could see David, though, with the sling, kind of as a sniper, being able to do something. But I think just the sheer power he showed on Mount Carmel could show that, wow, this is a powerful dude. Really tuned into God. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and also with Elijah running faster than a chariot to beat the king. He takes fasting to a whole nother level there. He's the fastest. But this is a tough one, because David, David is the epitome of the kings of Israel. Elijah is the epitome of the prophets of Israel. It's a tough battle, and when it comes to the story of the Bible, which was more important, the kings of Israel or the person who helped God communicate with the people? It's a tough one.
I guess I didn't think about it like that. What's more important? On my sheet I have David going through here. But what's more important, the kings of Israel or the people who spoke for God? You're bringing up a good point here. And Elijah is is super important to that era and represents so much more. And actually, before Jesus is to come into the world, the Elijah must come. And that's pretty important stuff there. Someone who would make way the path for God. That's pretty big stuff. So, who do you have moving through here? Do you have David?
I also have David, but just as we discuss it, I mean, what Elijah did was standing up to those kings and those rulers. And we do have David. He was initially a great guy, but we eventually see his missteps, and he did exactly what God said a king would do, and that is mess up and bring the people down with him. And Elijah, his whole business was freeing the people from the slavery of those other religions and the evil they were committing, and he lifted up the people.
Well, let's think about it this way. If you were to remove one of these characters from the Bible, we're not suggesting you do that at all. That's ridiculous. But if you were to remove one of these, who would we miss more? And I feel like, although I think Elijah is super important, I think I would miss David more.
Yeah,
I think his kingship, his line, that the Messiah would be born through, that's big stuff. The Psalms. I mean, come on, that would be a lot to not have. And with Elijah, we don't have his writings, we have his work. And so maybe in that sense, I'm thinking more towards David.
Well, back to your Ryan.
I think, when you say who would you miss the most, I think that is important because the story of the Bible, I mean, we get at this over and over, what is the story of the Bible? And that's so important here, but so much of it is fall, God raising people up, and David, he was raised up by God, but eventually on his own he did fall, and we see ultimately Jesus being raised up to overcome.
Yeah, I see David taking this one. This isn't easy by any means, but he's a 4. Elijah's a 4. David's a 1. It's hard to argue against David right here, even though we tried to. Let's throw David through, and we'll have another matchup for our Elite 8. I'm sorry, Sweet 16. But David will move through to the Elite 8. That's how it works. There we go, David. All right, we got one more Sweet 16 matchup here. We have the prophet Isaiah going up against Esther. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Isaiah v. Esther, and I think this is where I see Isaiah maybe pulling away a little bit. I think Esther's been strong up until this point, but I feel like Isaiah, again, if we go back to who would we miss more, I mean, I guess we'd miss Esther a lot because, again, she saved the nation. But Isaiah has the book that he wrote, which is so important to our faith. So do you see Esther being able, or who do you see kind of heavier in this match?
Yeah, I think when you look at Esther saving her people, that is so key and so important. But what is the nation of Israel if they're not following God? They're just another people. And so she saved a people group, but Isaiah brought the people back to God and said, no, you need to stop this. He is the way. And it was so important that he was there to act as a stopgap for all these other nations saying, this is how it's going to be. And he said, no. God says, follow me.
Sure, I think we're going to see a lot of this when we move into the New Testament, when we base on characters by what they did versus what they said. Foreshadowing, we're going to see John, the writer of the gospel, go up against the Samaritan woman. And man, that's a hard battle. But because of John's writing, we don't have the Samaritan woman, if that makes sense. So I think with Isaiah, I feel like that again too. We have his writings, we have his vision of God. We see in Isaiah even the moving away from just a temple-centric people to a God who is above all, who wants all the nations to be saved. And so Isaiah 53, that the 5th gospel, we would really miss that, if we didn't have him. Not that one has to go away. I just feel like Isaiah has more potential, especially even moving on to going on up against someone like a King David.
Yeah, and also when you look at the Gospels and we look at those, and how incredible is it that we have that peace and assurance and just good news. And he was the gospel writer of the time. He was the little glimmer of gospel that the people had back then. A lot of it was law and destruction and warfare, and Isaiah said, there is assurance, there is hope, and I think that's huge.
Sure. Let's move Isaiah through. We loved Esther, and Esther, she had a good showing. I don't think people saw her going this far, and so I'm excited that she did. I feel like moral victory is good for her. It'll be sad to say goodbye to her. But this brings us to the final matchup of the video here. The winner of this matchup will be proceeding into the Final Four. And here we have King David going up against Mr. Isaiah, a 1 seed, versus Isaiah is a 6 seed. What are your initial thoughts here? Because I'm feeling this is a pretty big battle as well. Well, first of all, who do you think would win in a physical fight?
For this one, I'm thinking David.
I think David too. I think David could probably handle himself. I just feel like Elijah is more gritty than when I hear Isaiah, and maybe that makes no sense at all. But that's what I'm thinking right now.
I mean, Elijah was really in the dirt of it all, and in the sacrifice battles and all that. But Isaiah is, as we've been saying, a bringer of good news, and we see David, he brought an earthly good news, and then he fell, and I think that was so pivotal for the people, and I suppose you could say something that negative is important to the Bible story, but Isaiah really, I mean, most of his job was cleaning up the family screw-ups from that whole generation.
Yep, and if you think about all the writing attributed to David, there's so much there. With David, not only do we have someone who did a lot, we have someone who produced a lot. And so we have, the books of Samuel, written about him. And then we have all the Psalms, and so we have so much about him. And we see in his story that we see him fall, but then we get the Psalms where we see his prayers of repentance. And I just think David, in the story of the Bible, going back to Jesus' genealogy, Jesus is a son of David, and would be a king in that line. And God had made a promise to David that a king in his family would reign, forever. And Jesus is the fulfillment of that Davidic king. And I think Isaiah would be sitting here with us going, yeah, I think it's probably good to move David on. He is important. I'm maybe a little less important. What do you think about Isaiah, though? Do you think Isaiah could take David?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's such a mix of what do they symbolize and what did they write and bring to us and what did they do, and there's all these questions swirling around. But I think when you look at the stories and the covenants also, we're not bringing those in even, and just the importance of what David did in his life, and how Jesus was a fulfillment of what David should have been, and what he could have been if he fully followed God.
Yeah, I mean, we really like Isaiah. I really like Isaiah. I mean, I fought for him over Esther, over I think, who else did he beat? I think he beat out Samuel as well. So I mean, I like Isaiah a ton. I just don't. I go back to the argument of who would I miss more, and that's really hard. I would miss them both a ton. I'm glad we don't have to do this picking like this, but I do feel David is stronger. I do have a son named David, and that's part of why his name is David, also for his grandpa. But I feel like I think David has the edge here.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna agree with that. I think Isaiah, so important, and what he did and what he wrote and what he provided for the people was hope, and David did for a time, and I guess by his own failings, as great as he was, it kind of showed how great Jesus eventually would be. Without, if there was someone that was almost perfect and then Jesus, it's hard to see that difference. But David, as messed up as he was, going and then Jesus fulfilling it.
A man after God's own heart, and that's what God says about him. And that's pretty powerful. And also, to think that that in his failings, he does receive that grace and experiences that, and I think does a good job representing this entire region. So I think we're putting him through the Final Four.
Yeah.
So Braylon's going to write that in, and you can start tallying up your scores, and you can write your comment below, and you can see how you're doing. The next video will be probably coming out next week, as we have time to film another one of these. But I'd like to invite Mr. Jim Engstrom up on the stage here to offer some follow-up thoughts on how this all went and what we got wrong and what could have been better. Why don't we, should we get another chair?
No.
You're just going to be right there. Okay, so where did we botch this up? Where did we?
Well, I mean, it's clear that Esther and Elijah got robbed. I guess this is an example of, look, it's all, including me, it's all men. So we're keeping women in their place. It's just ridiculous. I mean, well, if you look back at the previous in the Torah region, keep Eve in her place. I don't know. It's pretty ridiculous. That you have somebody like Nehemiah that just does so many amazing things, and he's the first person in history that we know of that ever used a passport. It's in the Bible.
Wow.
But no.
Now, I think with Nehemiah though, he had a bad early matchup. He got seeded pretty low. It's possible that in the seeding that the people who seeded him just didn't think much of his story and really felt Samuel was a higher rank. But yeah, that was a hard matchup to experience right away. I could have seen him maybe going a round or two, but I don't see him going far. Who did you have going all the way through?
Well, I had Elijah going to the Final Four.
Well,
so
now that's not correct anymore. So you have to adjust your bracket. And
I want to mention the fact that the scoring system is messed up.
What's wrong with the scoring system?
You get 1 point for the first round, 2 points for the second, third.
Yep.
You get 3 and then 4.
Yep.
So that means each progressive round is worth less than the previous round. It needs to double each round. That's all I wanted to say.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. If you're watching the end of this, you made it all the way through this. We're proud of you. This was a lot to go through.
Congratulations.
So, have a good day. Hope you're well. We'll talk soon.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
There you go. All right.